And Amy, so one of the most over-reported, melodramatized stories of the last week is the supposed infighting in the Trump camp, the Trump transition team. You know, some people come, some people go, some people are jockeying for different cabinet posts and other important presidential appointments, and some people aren't. And I understand the media has to make a big deal about this because they've got to, fill their pages and fill their 24-hour cable news networks. But so much of this, to me, is overblown. The Steve Bannon stuff, in particular. What say you, Chicago Tribune editorial board member Kristen McQuarrie?
I would agree with that. I mean, I did some digging about Steve Bannon, and most of the criticism about him is like 6 degrees of separation. You know, an article that was posted on Breitbart that people interpret to be I mean, I have not. He had a radio show. If he was an anti-Semite or he was a racist human being, wouldn't they have audio? Wouldn't there something have emerged that was more concrete than here are 6 headlines from Breitbart that prove that he is A, B, and C? So and you know what? There was a lot of controversy when Rahm Emanuel was chosen chief of staff for President Obama.
Mm-hmm.
Someone who made some disparaging remarks. You know, if you wanted to jump on the feminist bandwagon, he told a male counterpart to take his tampon out and get to whatever point he was trying to make. He used, very rough language. He used the word retard at one time and had to make a statement of apology. So I think a lot of it is overblown, but I'm going to hold out, to see with Steve Bannon if he turns. Everyone around him says he is not this person that he's made out to be.
And even people who don't like him, like Alan Dershowitz, a man of the left, says, like, I haven't seen the evidence to make the case. And maybe we should exercise a little restraint when we throw around words like anti-Semite, because if you don't, then they become rendered meaningless through overuse and misapplication. That's not to say there are not some controversies. I mean, just differences of opinion about personnel choices and viewpoints that would be prevalent in particular posts. Rand Paul yesterday took up the matter of Secretary of State. Now, remember, Rand Paul was basically thrown off stage during the debate by Donald Trump early on in the primary campaign. But Rand Paul on the prospect of either Rudy Giuliani or former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, John Bolton, being Trump's pick for Secretary of State.
Bolton is the antithesis. Bolton is so far out there. He's advocating bombing everyone in the world. But Bolton is someone who is an unrepentant supporter of the Iraq War. But I also think Rudy Giuliani is as well. And I think Giuliani's been a friend to Trump, and I'm sure he's going to find a place in the administration. But I just think it would be less damaging if they found a place where he didn't completely disagree with President-elect Trump.
By the way, Rand Paul suggested someone like perhaps Tennessee Senator Bob Corker for Secretary of State as somebody who's more, quote-unquote, mainstream. Well, let's get a response from our friend, former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, a scholar at the American Enterprise Institute. He is Ambassador John Bolton, who joins us now. Ambassador Bolton, thanks for being with us again. Appreciate it.
Well, good morning. Glad to be with you.
So what about Rand Paul? You out there advocating bombing everyone and everything?
I'm kind of old school on the notion of presidential appointments, and I just think it's dishonorable to try and box the president-elect in by arguing in public about who the nominee ought to be. I recognize that leaves somebody in that position open to this kind of criticism, which is utterly unfounded. But beyond saying that, I'm just not going to get into it. I think that the president-elect's going to make his decisions in God's good time, and then we'll all move on from there.
What about the kind of direction, though, of Trump foreign policy, and in particular the advocates that are in the Rand Paul camp of sort of I don't want to say isolationism, but certainly detachment from the New World Order?
Well, I think Trump made several speeches during the course of the campaign. I think those speeches put him well within the Republican mainstream on foreign policy issues. Obviously, you're not in a campaign, you're not debating these issues at enormous length, but he's made it clear what I think is the absolute prerequisite to fulfill the larger promise to make America great again is that Trump put central emphasis on rebuilding the American military, which has been debilitated under 8 years of Obama budgets. And that will carry a certain amount of controversy with it as well, but it's exactly the right thing to do, because to restore the positions of the structures of deterrence that Obama has weakened over 8 years, you need to be in a position to demonstrate you can act if the deterrence fails. And your diplomacy is never stronger than when the American military is strong.
So, Ambassador, give us a behind-the-scenes look at what the Trump transition team is doing in terms of looking for a Secretary of State. Have you met with them? What sorts of questions are they asking? And also maybe line up a little bit your experience compared to someone like Rudy Giuliani, who keeps getting mentioned.
Well, again, I don't think it's appropriate, not gentlemanly, really, to get into what's going on behind the scenes, because fundamentally you're exposing a decision-making process that is intended to support the president-elect's decision. I've spent a lot of time in the executive branch of government. I believe in executive privilege. I think that confidentiality and decision-making is essential to having a full, open discussion among the president's advisors. So, we live in an age where you can barely walk down the street without somebody tweeting that you just passed them on the sidewalk. I can only speak for my own preference here. I just think getting into it is not appropriate. When there's an appropriate time, I have never been shy about giving anybody my opinion, but there's a time and a place for it, and right now it's not the time or the place.
Well, then let's go back to kind of the policy arena. If you're advising Donald Trump, even just as a pundit and a foreign policy expert, the most destructive foreign policy decision Barack Obama made that needs to be addressed, shortly after President Trump takes office.
Well, it's unquestionably the nuclear deal with Iran, which has been a strategic defeat for the United States of incalculable proportions. It has put Iran on a path to deliverable nuclear weapons, basically at a time of its choosing. It gave Iran basically all of the tangible benefits of the deal right at the front end, the relief from international sanctions, the unfreezing of, depending on how you calculate it, up to $150 billion of previously frozen assets, all in exchange for really insignificant, easily reversible concessions by Iran on the nuclear front. And all of the compliance that you expect from Iran takes place over an 8, 10, or 15-year period going down the road. We don't have great intelligence inside Iran. We have next to no intelligence inside North Korea, where it's entirely possible that Iranian and North Korean scientists are working jointly on aspects of the nuclear weapons program, as they have been working together for nearly 20 years at least on the ballistic missile program, which is significant because for both Iran and North Korea, ballistic missiles have a common purpose. They are not to launch weather satellites or communication satellites. They are delivery vehicles for nuclear warheads. So I think this is extraordinarily dangerous agreement, which I don't think Iran is complying with. I don't think they have since before the ink was dry, and which has provoked a nuclear arms race in the Middle East. Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Turkey, perhaps others, taking steps to get their own indigenous nuclear weapons capability.
And the International Atomic Energy Agency agrees with you about Iran violating the terms of the agreement, but the one of the Panjan drums over at the EU doesn't, saying earlier this week that, well, Trump can't just walk away from the Iranian nuclear deal because it's a multilateral agreement. But isn't it the case that at least America can, whether the rest of the world wants to or not?
Yeah, look, I am so tired of this theology in international affairs that once you make an agreement, it's forever. It's simply not true. And in the case either of what the Obama administration itself has called a political agreement, which is what this is, or in the case of a treaty, under the Constitution, our president has the sole right to withdraw America from that treaty or that agreement. I'll give you one example. I participated in it myself for George W. Bush, who wanted to build a national missile defense capability to protect the United States against rogue states like Iran and North Korea launching nuclear weapons at us. So we were constrained by the 1972 anti-ballistic missile treaty with the Soviet Union, which Russia succeeded to. And my first job as undersecretary at the State Department for President Bush and Secretary Powell was to go and negotiate our way out of that treaty with the Russians. We hoped they'd pull out of it with us. There were only two parties, but we wanted to do it together. The Russians declined to do it, so we gave notice of withdrawal, which you're permitted to do under the treaty, and we withdrew after the 6-month treaty waiting period. A president can abrogate treaties or deals at will, and if that's not understood, then it needs to be explained. Now, look, I don't have any illusions about how bad the situation is with Iran. If I had to bet right now, I would bet overwhelmingly that the most likely outcome is that Iran gets nuclear weapons. This deal made it easier for them to get nuclear weapons, and the Iranians knew it, and I think Obama knew it. They were trying to suck the Europeans in to extensive trade and investment deals with Iran to make the thought of withdrawing from the deal economically unpleasant. Now, we're not done with that yet either. You know, the Europeans can lift their sanctions. The House of Representatives voted almost unanimously yesterday or the day before to extend the Iran Sanctions Act that's been in place, not simply because of Iran's nuclear activities, but because of its state sponsorship of terrorism. Let's never forget, although Obama appeared to do so, Iran is the central banker of international terrorism and has been since 1979. Iran has not changed its behavior since the nuclear deal was agreed in the summer of 2015. If anything, its behavior has gotten worse. So I'd be prepared to debate this question at length. As you can tell, it's a serious mistake for the United States. It's a serious mistake for Israel. It's a serious mistake for our Arab friends in the Middle East. And although they don't fully appreciate it, it's a serious mistake for the Europeans, too.
How would you get around Congress? I mean, you would advise Trump to undo the deal, even though it has overwhelming support in the House and Senate and an extension of the deal. It does not have overwhelming support.
It does not have overwhelming support. And it doesn't matter constitutionally. The president has the authority. And I think if you look at polls to the extent that one believes their accuracy, there's been substantial and indeed majority opposition to this deal from the American people. And I think the more we explain what's wrong with the deal and what Iran gets out of it and the danger it poses, more and more people would understand it.
Before we let you go, I want to get your take on another instance where the revolt may present itself in a different country. We've had Brexit. We've had the Trump election. The first week of December, you have a referendum in Italy. Prime Minister Renzi there trying to get voter approval for essentially more powers for the central government. And early reports are that no is leading. I wonder how important that referendum is and what it will signal if the government is defeated in terms of their desire for more power.
Well, I think most people do interpret this referendum as an opportunity for the Italian population to vote sort of on their general level of dissatisfaction with policy across the entire European Union. It's a bad issue for Renzi to have picked to vote on. Do you want to give me more power or not? Yes or no? I mean, three guesses what the instant reaction to that would be. But I think it's also reflective of popular dissatisfaction around the European Union. And it's not on issues like immigration or racial matters or religious matters, as so many people would like you to believe. I think if you look at Brexit and you look at a lot of the popular dissatisfaction within Europe, it's people saying, you know, we can govern ourselves. We don't need our betters in Brussels, the high-minded of the world, telling us what to do. We'll govern ourselves. And I think that's a very strong sentiment in the United States. It was a strong sentiment from the beginning because, after all, in the American system, the Constitution's very clear in its first three words who has sovereignty? We the people. And we the people are speaking in Italy, and they spoke in Brexit, and I think there's more to come.
All right. He is former U.S. Ambassador to the UN. Ambassador John Bolton, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Glad to be with you. Thanks for having me.
And he joined us on turnkey.pro answer line.